Maseches Nazir Daf Gimel. We begin with the last few lines on Daf Beis. The Gemara is discussing if Shaila. The Gemara will try to bring a number of proofs, some from our Mishnah. After the Gemara resolves that topic, the Gemara will continue working through the Mishnah and commenting on the examples that are given there of what is Matame and Nazir and cause him to cancel his Nazirus. We'll go through it line by line. Now, a number of these sugyas here are unclear, and there are various different readings in the Rishonim. I'm going to go primarily with Taisvus' reading and try to explain it to the best we can. So we begin at the bottom of Daf Beis. The Gemara asks a Shaila. The Gemara brings Rami Bar Chama, who asks a Shaila. We've seen that a Nazir only has to end his Nazirus if he became Tameh of a container of the bones of the mace, if it has at least half a kav of bones. Although Tumas Oel is closed by a quarter of a kav, for a Nazir, he doesn't have to cancel his Nazirus unless it becomes Talmei in an Ohel at least from half a kav. That's the minimum size. So the Gemara asks, what if he had a quarter of a kav, but it was from chashav bones? What's chashav bones? So we've seen that the spine and the skull count on a higher level. They cause more tumah than other bones. So maybe when the Mishnah said it has to be half a kav, it only meant from other bones, but maybe the spine and the skull would be enough to have just a quarter of a kav. Is that true? So Gemara brings Rava. So Rava says, it proves you from the Mishnah that it's not true, because the Mishnah lists the spine and the skull, and it doesn't say a quarter of a kav of spine and skull. It just says quarter and skull. It just says spine and skull, which implies that you need the entire spine and skull to be mitame, and a quarter of a kav is not enough. So you see, there is no such halacha. A quarter of a kav, even from spine and skull, are not mitame. So Gemara asks, but Rava said that when it said spine and skull in the Mishnah, it wasn't talking about a whole spine and skull. It was talking about just a quarter of a kav. So what is Rava's proof doing here? It doesn't make any sense. Now the Rishonim search for where we had this Rava quoted in the Gemara. Taisu says he doesn't know where it is. We don't have that step brought in the Gemara anywhere. Either way, the Gemara answers that after Rava learned from Rabbi Akiva that you need to have the entire spine and skull, and it's not enough to have just a quarter of a kav, that is when he brought his proof to this Shiloh. The Gemara now brings the next proof, which is from Shammai. In the Brayso Koda on the last off, we had three opinions. How many bones do you need to be a Matame Ba'ohal? We had Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Shammai himself. Shammai's opinion was just one bone from the skull or from the spine. So the Gemara says that the Chachamim, that's the one we're really asking, and it can't be that they are so different than Shammai. The Shammai says just one bone, and the Chachamim would say half a kav of bones. The Chachamim could say a quarter of a kav of bones, but it couldn't be so far away as to say half a kav of bones. So therefore, we can prove that a quarter of a kav of bones is enough if it's from the skull and the spine. So the Gemara says, no, maybe not. Shammai is exceedingly machmir, and in this shita, he goes as far as to say one bone, but the Chachamim could be very different and say you need even half a kav. So the Gemara says, so let's bring proof the other way, that the Rabbanan are saying that you need even half a kav, because since Shammai is so machmir, the Rabbanan want to be machmir too and say a quarter kav, so then they should spell out the chumrah just like Shammai spells out his chumrah. The fact that they don't spell out a chumrah, maybe that indicates that they are very mekel and go as far as half a kav. You need half a kav to be metame and to be seiser nazirus, and a quarter of a kav is not enough. So the Gemara says no, that's not a good proof. You cannot make that determination. It could be that they really hold of quarter kav, and they didn't have to express to Shammai his chumrah what they hold. Maybe all they were arguing with Shammai is that Shammai says one bone is enough. They're saying no, one bone is not enough, but a quarter kav is enough. But they wouldn't go so far away as to say half a kav is enough. The Gemara now refers to another sugya, and that's that in discussing Tumas Ohel, we have three halachos that is relevant. One is our Mishnah here, which talks about when it is soiser, the nazirus of a nazir. When is it enough of a source of tumah that his nazirus is destroyed? He has to start over. Another halacha is when is it metame him that he cannot eat truma and kachim. And the third halacha is when is he metame him that he cannot bring a carbon pesach because of his tumah. Now our Mishnah had said that far as bones and blood go, for a nazir you need to have half a kav and half a revius, half a kav of bones and half a revius of blood. The Mishnah in Oil that said as far as kachim and truma, you only need a quarter of a kav and a quarter of a log. Now, those things are not a contradiction, talking about different halachos. The Gemara now brings that there are actually 3 opinions, and our Mishnah and the Mishnah all together form the 3rd opinion. So the first opinion, Rabbi Eliezer quotes all 3. The first opinion, which he calls Zakenu Harishainim, the early elders, they said the halacha for all 3 things is half a kav and half a like. You only tell me for Nazir, for Kachim, for Truma, and for Korban Pesach with half. That does not fit with the Mishnah and Olas. Now, the second opinion, which he calls Miktsason, is the opposite. It holds everything is a quarter of a kav. And this agrees with our Mishnah here. All things, both Nazir, Truma, Kachim, Korban Pesach, are all Tameh from Tumas Oel, and you can't do any of those. All of those are ruined by just a quarter of a kav of bones and a quarter of a revius of blood from a mace. Then he brings the 3rd opinion, which he calls Beis Shalcharayim, who says a split din, and this fits with both our Mishnah here and the Mishnah Olas. It says for Nazir, it's half a kav and half a log, and for Korban Pesach and Truma and Kachim, it's a quarter of a kav and a quarter of a log. Now, the Gemara comments that it seems like the halacha is like this Beis Shalcharayim, which fits the 2 together, and it's the last opinion, because our Mishnah seems to go that way. So Gemara asks, we have a general rule that whenever you have a machlokes between 2 and a 3rd one comes along and takes sides, you don't go with that 3rd one. Now, Tosfos asks elsewhere that we have a rule that you do go with the 3rd one, and Tosfos answers it. But here the Gemara is quoting from a Gemara in Chulin and Bechorah, so you don't go with this 3rd opinion. So how come here we go with this 3rd opinion, which seems to take a middle ground between the first 2, a compromise as it were? So Gemara answers because this doesn't come from this 3rd opinion. This actually comes from the Nevi'im Chagei Zcharia Malachi. They had a Masera going all the way back to them, and that's where this halacha comes from. Okay, next the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah started off by saying Al Elu HaNazir Megalech, and it ended off by saying Al Elu HaNazir Megalech, saying these are the ones which cause a Nazir to break his Nazirus and have to start over. And it says Elu twice. Each one is limiting, excluding something that it doesn't count. The question is, what is each one excluding? So the Gemara says the Elu in the beginning of the Mishnah is to exclude a piece of bone the size of a barley, which although it creates tumas maga, that is, it creates tuma if you touch it, or if you carry it even without touching it, it does not create tumas oil. So etzem kasa'ira, that is, one is on the same room as, does not ruin his nazirus. Now the elu at the end is to exclude if you have what's called in even zechuchis, which is a cover for a coffin, that itself does not create Tumah for Nazir. Next, the Gemara says, how do you understand the Mishnah says that a Nazir's Nazirus is ruined by half a kav of bones and by a bone the size of a barley grain? Well, a barley grain is less than half a kav. So if he's ruined by a barley grain, certainly it's ruined by half a kav, and even by less than half a kav. So what's going on? So Gemara explains, half a kav is if there's no piece that's the size of a barley grain, that it is ground up into flour. There, if you have a half a kav full, then it is metame and ruins in Nazirus. But if you don't have half a kav full, then if you have a piece the size of a sa'ira, it ruins it. If you have no piece that size, then it does not ruin it. Okay, next the Gemara discusses Aver min HaMeis and Aver min HaChai. And there the halacha had been that it has to have enough flesh on it that it could survive if it would be part of a living person, that if you had a limb that had this amount of flesh, it would be able to heal and recover and not end up withering away and being removed. Now, all the examples, all the halachas Rabbanan in our Mishnah are contrasted by the next Mishnah that says all the things that cause tumah. In this Mishnah, it causes Nazirus to fall. In this Mishnah, if you have less than that, and the next Mishnah says it does not cause Nazirus to fall. The only one that's left out is this Aver min HaMeis that has on it enough flesh to heal, or Aver min HaChai that has on enough flesh to heal. It doesn't say that if it has less flesh than that, it does not cause the Nazirus to fall. So the first question is, what if it does? If it has less flesh than that, it's not mentioned in the next Mishnah. So what's the halacha? So Gemara says the machlokes of Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Yochanan says you can learn out from our Mishnah that the only way that it causes the Nazirus to fall is if it has that amount of flesh. Obviously, if it has less, then it does not cause the Nazirus to fall. Reish Lakish, however, says, why is it not mentioned in the next Mishnah? Obviously, if it has less, it still will cause the Nazirus to fall, and you cannot be medayek from the first Mishnah because it should say it in the next Mishnah that it does not. So Yochanan says, what do you mean? I don't have to spell it out. anything which you can make a diak from the first Mishnah, you don't have to spell out in the next Mishnah. You already learned from the first Mishnah that if it has less, it's not going to make it full. So Gemara is going to ask, well, you have all the other examples where you could clearly learn from the first Mishnah that this is the minimum to make Nazir's full, yet it's spelled out in the next Mishnah that if you have less than that, it does not. The first example is half a kav of the bones. Our Mishnah clearly says half a kav ruins Nazir's, less than that does not, but yet the next Mishnah says that a quarter of a kav does not. So I'd have to say that. So Gemara says, no, you do have to say that to teach me that for touching it or carrying it, it does ruin Nazirus. It's only for OL that it doesn't ruin Nazirus. If it would have just said our Mishnah that half a kav is what ruins Nazirus, you would have thought less than half a kav, even for touching and carrying, doesn't ruin Nazirus. Therefore, we have to specify for OL it doesn't ruin Nazirus, but for touching and carrying, it does ruin Nazirus. Next example the Gemara brings is that it says in our Mishnah half a lug of blood. You could see from there that a quarter of a lug of blood would not be Matame and not ruin Nazirus, yet the next Mishnah goes ahead and spells out that a quarter of a lug is not ruining Nazirus. Why do you have to say that? So the Rabbi Yochanan answers again, this is to exclude from Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva holds that even if it's less than a quarter of a lug, even if it's less than half a lug, because it comes from two different mesim, it's still Matame and an OL, and therefore you have to teach me that it's not true. Gemara asks, what's the case of this machlokes of here? We're arguing about an aver that cannot heal. It does not have enough flesh to heal. What's with the bone on it? If there is a sa'ira shear of the bone, so what is the tzad that it's not matami? It's matami because of the sa'ira. And if it doesn't have a sa'ira shear of the bone, how is there any tzad that it could heal and it could be matami because of the flesh on it? You don't even have a sa'ira there. It's not even a limb. It's not anything. So Gemara answers, we're talking about it doesn't have enough of the bone. It's a tiny thing. But there's a Xeris HaKasav that if it's an aver of flesh that could heal, then it would still, if it's an aver of aver min Chai or aver min Hames, then it would still be included in the laws of Tumah. And this is Rish Lakish's answer, and he brings it from two brises which show this Xeris HaKasav. The two brises, one is discussing Tumas Oil, one is discussing Tumas Maga, where a person touches the dead. So let's go through the brises. The first brisa discusses the pasuk V'chol asher yigal pnei asada v'chal cherev oy b'meis oy b'etzem adam oy b'kever, and it says on a yitma shivas yamim. So the brisa explains what each of these words means. V'chol asher yigal pnei asada, the face of the field, that refers to Tumas Oel. That's how we know we're discussing Tumas Oel. It's pnei asada, the face of the field. We're not talking about where you touch the mace itself. Bechol refers to Ever Min Chai, that has enough flesh on it to heal. Cherev teaches me that the metal that touches the mace counts as a Rishon L'Tumah, like the mace itself. B'mace is a aver that's cut off from the mace, and of course it has enough to heal. Etzem, that is a quarter of a kav. Kever is talking about a grave that's sealed, where Tumah goes up and down Tumas Oel from that grave itself. Now, Rabbi Huda in a different brisa talks about Tumas Negia, and there you have a pasuk as well that the Gemara is going to give a drasha and explain word for word how you read it. It says, so what are all those things? So Hanageya be'etzem Ibechol, etzem is an etzem kasa'ira, a barley-sized piece of bone. Ibechol is the limb which is removed from the living and does not have enough to heal. Mace, that is an aver that's removed from the dead, and Bekever is a grave that is before Matan Torah. The law of all of these is that there's no Tumas O, but there is Tumas Maga and Tumas Masa, that there is Tumah from touching it or carrying it. So now the Gemara asks, Ever Min Mace, what are we talking about over here? Again, if it has Etzem Kasa'ira, then it's the same as Nageya Be'etzem. If it doesn't have Etzem Kasa'ira, so how is it Metame Tumas Tumah at all? So the Gemara answers, it must be talking about where there's no Etzem Kasa'ira and it's Xeris HaKasav. So that's Rish Lakish saying. So there you see that you do have Tumas Maga and OL, even in something that the Torah was marbid, even if it doesn't have an etzem kasara, as long as it's from the living or from the dead and has enough to heal. So the Gemara says, what's Yochanan going to do with this? He's going to say this is talking about Tumas Masa. Even though it's listed for Tumas Maga, it's talking about something else. It's talking about Tumas Masa, and it's a different halacha.